Welcome back, everyone, to Behind the Arc Basketball. The 2019-20 Big East college basketball season was a much improved one for the conference compared to the season prior. During this offseason, the Big East lost its top 5 scorers from last season in the conference, with Marcus Howard, Miles Powell, Tyshawn Alexander, Najee Marshall, and Kamar Baldwin all departing. While some of the top players in the Big East have departed, the conference will have more players who will have greater opportunities to step up and take their game to the next level this season. In this video, I'm going to give a rundown of my Big East Conference college basketball rankings for the 2020-21 college basketball season. We'll start off here on number 11. The team that I predict that will finish last this season in the Big East happens to be the Georgetown Hoyas. So I predict that things will not go so well this season for Georgetown, as they're going to go into a gigantic rebuild. Georgetown was supposed to be a tournament team this past season, but completely fell apart at the end of the season as the team was hit with the injury bug and finished with an overall record of 15-17. The Hoyas lost multiple players in the offseason due to graduation and players transferring out, as they lost their top 8 scorers out of 11 players. The 2019 Big East Freshman of the Year, James Akinjo, left Georgetown for Arizona during last season. Then Josh LeBlanc and Galen Alexander transferred after receiving restraining orders last November for accusations of sexual harassment and breaking and entering. Freshman Myron Garner also transferred, as he was accused of sexual harassment and assault as well. However, the biggest loss happened in the offseason in May. That's when leading scoring guard Mac McClung left Georgetown to transfer over to Texas Tech. For the graduating departures, Patrick Ewing losing 7-foot center leading rebounder Omer Yurtseven to graduation. Georgetown also losing starters Terrell Allen and Jagon Mosley. For this season's roster for Georgetown, only 3 players will come back from this past season. The Hoyas will bring back their number 4 scorer with guard Javon Blair and their number 5 scorer with forward Jamarco Pickett. Also, their number 9 scorer coming back with Qudus Wahab. That is all that's coming back for Georgetown that had played meaningful minutes with the team this past season. The Hoyas will bring in a grad transfer from Arkansas with Jalen Harris, but he only started 5 games last season where he averaged only 4.2 points per game. Former Northwestern State forward Chudier Bile, who transferred over to Georgetown to play his final season of college basketball for the Hoyas, will be playing this season. He averaged 14.3 points per game and 7.6 rebounds per game last season. Georgetown also getting in another transfer from Siena, who's junior guard Donald Carey. He's going to have 2 seasons of eligibility left, but he was the number 4 scorer for mid-major Siena last season, averaging 11.3 points per game. And also a top 100 4-star recruit coming in with freshman forward Jamari Sibley. I feel like for this season for Georgetown, there's going to be a lot of growing pains for the Hoyas, as they are expected to have a down season. They got crushed by transfers in the middle of the season. Once again, the big one in the offseason with Mac McClung heading over to Texas Tech. And I predict that the 4th season for head coach Patrick Ewing will be another rough one with a last place finish in the Big East. Now we'll take a look here at number 10, the team that usually finishes last in the Big East. I predict here is going to not finish last this season. They will finish second to last at number 10. Happens to be the DePaul Blue Demons. Believe it or not, DePaul started off last season with a record of 12-1, and that included a 15-point victory in the non-conference slate against Iowa, and also another win in overtime against Texas Tech. Unfortunately for DePaul, once they got into conference play, the Blue Demons just crumbled and got demolished by their opponents. They finished with a Big East record of 3-15. DePaul has finished the past 4 seasons dead last in the Big East. Even with their constant bottom of the conference finishes, the past 2 seasons for DePaul, they have put together a winning record in the last back-to-back seasons of 35-33. Which is the best 2 back-to-back seasons for DePaul since the 2003 through 2005 seasons, when DePaul last played in the Conference USA before moving over to the Big East. As for the losses in the offseason for DePaul, the biggest one happened to be double-double machine forward Paul Reed, who went over to the NBA draft. Guard Jalen Coleman-Lands also transferred over to Iowa State. In the offseason, DePaul was able to pick up 3 graduate transfers that should be able to be a part of the rotation this season, with guard Brian Patrick heading over from Purdue Fort Wayne, guard Ray Salney from Monmouth, and forward Paulie Polycap coming in from Manhattan. The biggest name, however, to come to DePaul is Javon Freeman Liberty, who is named the 2020 All-Conference First Team and All-Defensive Team for the Missouri Valley Conference. Freeman Liberty withdrew his name from the NBA draft to play another season of college basketball. He averaged 19 points per game and just over 6 rebounds per game last season for Valparaiso, while averaging 2.2 steals per game, which ranked 15th in all college basketball. However, at the time of this recording, Freeman Liberty is currently waiting on a waiver to play this season. He is currently listed as a sit-out transfer, but if he is able to gain eligibility, this will be a major help for DePaul this season when Freeman Liberty does finally play for the Blue Demons. As for the players returning back to DePaul will get back senior guard Charlie Moore, who averaged 15.5 points per game. He was the leading scorer this past season for the Blue Demons. Senior forward Jalen Butts is heading back as well, as he averaged just over 10 points per game, and he ranked second on the team last season in rebounds behind Paul Reed. Sophomore forward Romeo Williams, he'll be back. He started all 32 games in his freshman season. He's going to look to build off his solid first season. Junior forward Darius Hall will be back. He played off the bench last season. I predict that he should be able to move up into the starting lineup and see an uptick in minutes. The good news I predict this season for DePaul is that they will not finish last in their conference. I predict that that's going to go to Georgetown. However, I predict that the NCAA tournament drought will continue this year for DePaul, as their last NCAA tournament appearance happened back in 2004, and I put them at number 10 in the Big East this season. Now we'll move on to number 9. As I predict that will go out to the St. John's Red Storm this year, predicting them at number 9 in the Big East. In his first season under head coach Mike Anderson, the Red Storm finished with a winning record of 17-15. I predict more the same this season, with St. John's finishing a few games above 500 overall. It's kind of going to look similar for my prediction. In the offseason, the Red Storm lost their top 2 scorers from last season, with guard LJ Figueroa transferring to Oregon and guard Mustafa Heron graduating from the program. Heron played 21 games last season due to an ankle injury. Now, as for this season for St. John's, the future is going to be telling with the improvement of the sophomore guard Julian Champagny. He averaged 9.9 points per game last season. He led the Red Storm as a freshman with 6.5 rebounds per game. He led the team in rebounds. Champagny is looking to build off back-to-back 23 and 21 point games to close out the regular season back in March. Senior point guard Rasheem Dunn, he'll also be back for St. John's, as he dished out a career-high 10 assists in March against Creighton. Dunn and Champagny, both of these players will combine as a lethal guard duo this season for the Red Storm, carrying this team, I predict. Aside from the senior-sophomore duo, the Red Storm are loaded with juniors on their roster as well. Heading back into the starting lineup will be junior forward Josh Roberts. He was the second leading rebounder in the team behind Champagny. And also Anderson will bring back 2 more juniors, with forward Marcellus Erlington and Greg Williams Jr. I predict that both of these players will move up as starters. I also predict that St. John's will not make the NCAA tournament this season, but I do see them improving and having a bright future if they can make the improving ways up this season for St. John's. With 6 juniors and the impact sophomore of Champagny on the roster, I think that the Red Storm are 1 season away from going back to the NCAA tournament if this roster keeps on improving this season and if they do retain these players in the offseason. So I predict St. John's at number 9 this season in the Big East. Now we'll move over to number 8 for my prediction for the Big East this season. That's where I predict the Butler Bulldogs at number 8 in the conference. I predict that they're going to be a bubble team this season. I predict that they're going to be on the outside of the NCAA tournament and will miss the tournament, however. Butler got off to a red-hot start last season. They started off with a 15-1 record, 3-0 to start off Big East play through early January. The Bulldogs finished with a record of 22-9 overall, and they would have made the NCAA tournament. Similar to Xavier, who lost their top 2 scorers when Marshall and Jones from last season, Butler suffered 2 massive losses in the offseason due to graduating departures. With their leading scorer, Kamar Baldwin, who averaged 16.7 points per game last season. Also, they lost Sean McDermott as well, who is the number 2 scorer and rebounder last season. A third player with Jordan Tucker also announced that he would enter the NBA draft and not return back to Butler. However, Butler will have experience this season with 3 seniors heading back onto the roster. The Bulldogs will bring back starter Bryce Enzi, who will be able to help Butler tremendously down low in the post and rebounding. Enzi shot just under 63% from the floor last season, as he averaged 9.2 points per game and 6.6 rebounds per game last season. 3-year starter and guard Aaron Thompson will be back as well, as he'll look to improve offensively for the Bulldogs. Senior forward Bryce Golden, who took a much-needed step up in his second season for Butler, will be back as well, along with three-year bench player and guard Christian Davis. David, as I predict here, that David should be able to see a significant increase in minutes this season. Butler got a much-needed grad transfer from South Carolina with Jair Bolden, who is a guard and averaged 8.5 points per game last season for the Gamecocks, along with connecting with just over 41% of his three-point shots. He should be able to boost up Butler's perimeter. As for Butler's bench, the Bulldogs look thin coming off the bench as they'll have 5 freshmen this season from the bench. I expect that Butler is going to take a step back due to those 2 big departures last season with their top 2 scorers, Baldwin and McDermott, leaving the program. And now at number 7 in the conference, I predict the Xavier Musketeers at number 7. I predict that they're going to be a bubble team, and I predict, same as Butler, they're going to be on the outside and just miss the NCAA tournament. In the offseason, Xavier lost their leading scorer, forward Najee Marshall, to the NBA draft. Also, the Musketeers lost their number 2 scorer, leading rebounder on their team with Tyreek Jones, who averaged a double-double as he graduated from the program. A third starter with point guard Quentin Gooden also graduated from Xavier, but heading back to the Musketeers this season as starters will be guard Paul Scruggs, who I predict will lead Xavier this season. Scruggs has started he has started 63 games during his 3 seasons for Xavier, and he averaged 12.7 points per game last season. The second starter for Xavier back will be senior forward Jason Carter, looking to improve this season. In his second year will be forward Zach Fremantle, as he averaged 7.5 points per game, 4.3 rebounds per game last season as a freshman. I expect the sophomore guard, Kai Tandy, to move up into the starting lineup, as well as Tandy averaged just under 7 points per game as a freshman, and he saw his minutes increase late last season. The final spot in the starting 5 I predict for Xavier will be a grad transfer with Brian Griffin, who averaged a double-double during his last 2 seasons for starting at Division II Mercy College in New York. Now, head coach Travis Steele, he's also going to bring in 2 4-star freshmen with guards Dwan Odom and CJ Wilcher into the lineup. Losing their top 2 scorers, though, with Marshall and Jones, these were both massive losses in the offseason for Xavier. The improvement, though, going to have to be closely monitored with these 2 players. If they can take the much indeed steps up this season with Fremantle and Tandy, that's going to be beneficial towards Xavier's future to get them back to the NCAA tournament. However, this season, though, I predict that Xavier is just 1 year away from making the tournament. It will have a finish similar in the conference to what they had last season here. I predict Xavier at number 7 in the Big East. Now we'll move on to number 6 I predict in the Big East this season. It happens to be the Marquette Golden Eagles. I predict that Marquette's going to be a bubble team, and I predict that they're going to have a 50-50 shot at the NCAA tournament. And I predict that this team is going to have play-in game potential to be a part of the first 4. Marquette lost a lot of big names to graduation. Of course, the biggest one, college basketball's leading scorer in 2019-20, Marcus Howard, who averaged 27.8 points per game last season. Another key player who graduated from the program happened to be 3-year starter and forward Sakar Anna. Also, Marquette suffering another loss in the offseason. Second leading scorer Brennan Bailey left Marquette to pursue a pro basketball career. Last season's leading rebounder from the bench as well, 7-foot center Jace Johnson, also graduated from the program, along with bench forward Ed Morrow. With 3 starting spots to fill this season, the task of replacing Howard will be the most challenging and basically will be next to impossible to replace Marcus Howard's scoring production. Marquette was able to be saved this season, though, by a solid off-season transfer pickup at the point guard position, replacing Howard this season. To try to cut into some of that production will be sophomore and former Ohio State Buckeye DJ Carton, who is a top 35 recruit in the class of 2019. Carton was granted eligibility to play this season and played in 20 games for Ohio State before stepping away from the team. He averaged 10.4 points per game and 3 assists last season and should be able to help out Marquette tremendously. The acquisition of DJ Carton the offseason happened to be massive here to boost Marquette's scoring production. As for the players heading back to Marquette, the Golden Eagles will bring back 2 starting seniors with guards Kobe McEwen and also forward Theo John back on the team. Both McEwen and John helped tremendously last season in rebounding, with a duo averaging over 5 rebounds per game each. 2 additional players that should see an increased role this season in minutes per game should be senior forward Jamal Cain and junior guard Greg Elliott, who both averaged just over 5 points per game last season. Giving the Golden Eagles a boost will be 6'11" forward Dawson Garcia, who is a freshman 4-star top 50 recruit. And I expect Dawson Garcia to start right away for Marquette, along with an additional 4-star recruit they got as well at forward with Justin Lewis, who should be able to be a part of Marquette's bench. If the returning cast of this group here with McEwen, John, Kane, and Elliott can all take steps up to improve, along with DJ Carton, who has the shot to lead this team at the point guard position, I think that Marquette has a shot to sneak into the NCAA tournament, to be one of those last teams to fill up the spot as a bubble team. And that's where I predict Marquette at number 6 in the conference. It's basically nearly impossible to be able to replace any of that or cut into all that production that Marcus Howard last season had for scoring, but some of it will be able to be there though with a big acquisition in the offseason with coming over to the program with DJ Carton from Ohio State. That was a huge pickup right there, and that's why I got Marquette at number 6. Now we'll move on to number 5 here, as these 5 teams, all I predict, will be locks for the NCAA tournament this season. The Seton Hall Pirates, I predict here. I predict that they're going to be on the bubble for quite a bit of time, but I think that they're going to be an NCAA tournament team this season, a top 40 team that I predict as well. So I predict that they're going to be one of 5 locks to make the tournament from the Big East this season. Head coach Kevin Willard, he suffered 3 massive departures in the offseason due to graduation. Of course, the biggest loss happened to be leading scorer Myles Powell, who is a 3-year starter for the Pirates. He averaged 21 points per game last season. The second impact player that departed was graduating point guard Quincy McKnight, who averaged just under 12 points per game, led the Pirates with 5.4 assists per game. And also a third player graduated from the program, elite shot blocker, 7'2" center Romero Gill, who ranked 3rd in the nation with over 3 blocks per game last season. Replacing Powell is going to be the difficult task for this season, as well as this is going to be really tough for Willard to do. However, Willard able to work that transfer wire to bring in a solid grad transfer here to Seton Hall. Point guard Bryce Aiken, who averaged a career 16.8 points per game for the Harvard Crimson during his career. He's going to come into Seton Hall as a grad transfer. Aiken should be able to cut into some of that production from Myles Powell. Willard also adding in another transfer in the offseason with junior guard Tacone Mosen, who averaged 16.9 points per game last season as well at the mid-major level. Back for the Pirates will be forward Sandro Mamukelashvili, who is the second leading scorer and rebounder from this past season. He also made 54% of his shots from the floor. Mamukelashvili is going to have a big impact inside the season for the Pirates. Junior guard Jared Roden will also be back. He led Seton Hall rebounding last season, along with the 2 senior guards, Miles Cale, who happened to take a step down during his junior season. He looks for a bounce-back senior year. Also back is Shavar Reynolds as well, who will also return. And replacing Paul, of course, the biggest task this year for Seton Hall, but I'm confident in the Pirates that they'll be able to figure it out, and they'll be able to return to a top 40 team this season that lands on the right side of the bubble and makes the 2021 NCAA tournament. Now we'll move on to number 4 for my predictions here for the Big East Conference. It happens to be the Providence Friars they got in the conference at number 4 this season. After a roller coaster of a year in 2019-2020, in which Providence started out with a record of 6-6, they had losses to Northwestern, Pennsylvania, the College of Charleston, Long Beach State, and a 32-point loss against Florida. It seemed like Providence just had no life in them to start the first part of the season. That was until head coach Ed Cooley rose Providence from the dead, and the Friars played with desperation as their season was on the line. And then PC picked off their Big East opponents one by one once they got into conference play. And they got hot late last season and got on a 6-game winning streak to close it out, capping off their final victory on a 93-55 blowout W against DePaul. Providence did lose quite a bit of pieces in the offseason, with 5 seniors graduating from the program. Of course, the most notable senior being four-year player guard Alpha Diallo, who started 111 games during the course of his career at Providence. He averaged a career 12.2 points per game and 6.2 rebounds per game for the Friars. Point guard Lawan Pipkins, who played one season for PC last year, graduated as he was a major factor down the stretch. He scored 24 points against Marquette. He had 27 points against Villanova in those back-to-back games there against Marquette and Villanova. Also departing from the program in the offseason, we're graduating guard Malik White and forwards Khalif Young and Emmett Holt. However, head coach Ed Cooley, he's going to be bringing in two key transfers this season that's going to factor right into the mix as projected starters. Heading over to Providence will be point guard Jared Bynum from St. Joseph's and Noah Horchler from North Florida. Both Bynum and Horchler sat out last season due to NCAA transfer rules. Bynum is a 5'10" point guard, should be able to slide right into the spot to replace Pipkins at the point this season, as Bynum will also have 3 seasons of eligibility remaining at Providence, which is really beneficial towards the Friars' future. Bynum started 31 games as a freshman for St. Joseph's. He averaged 11.3 points per game and 4.5 assists per game back in the 2018-19 season. He had 3 games which he had 8 assists in, and he also had a career-high 9 assists against Davison. When point guard Lamar Kimball missed 10 games in 2019 due to injury, Bynum stepped up and he rose to the occasion for St. Joseph's, as his assist totals rose to an average of just under 6 assists per game through those 10 games that Kimball missed down on. Bynum also led St. Joseph's as a freshman in minutes per game as well. He logged in significant minutes as he started over 36 minutes per game his freshman season. The second transfer heading over to Providence should be able to start right away. Noah Horchler, senior forward, heading into the program, as Horchler started in 59 games during his 2 seasons for the North Florida Ospreys. He led North Florida during the 2018-19 season in points per game and rebounding, and also shooting as well. He nearly averaged a double-double, 16 points per game, along with 9.3 rebounds per game, and he connected on over 53% of his shots from the floor. In the 2018-19 season, Horchler scored double-digit points in 25 of his games, tallying in 13 double-doubles. As for the players returning back to Providence this season, the player to watch out for will happen to be junior guard David Duke, who averaged 14 points per game last season. He's going to be back, and he was number 2 in scoring behind Alpha Diallo last season, led the Friars in assists per game. Last season, David Duke improved to be a perimeter threat, as he had a great season from the perimeter, shooting the ball at 42% from the outside. Duke went 6 for 8 last season from the perimeter and a career-high 36-point performance against Creighton. I predict that David Duke's going to be the breakout candidate this year for Providence. As for the final 2 starters I predict in PC's lineup, they'll happen to be 6'10" center Nate Watson, as he'll be back as well, as Watson will look to take a step up this season as a rebounder. And the final starting 5 spot that I predict will be junior guard A.J. Reeves, who took a step down during his sophomore season, that I predict here that should be able to bounce back this season. Off the bench, Ed Cooley is going to get a sophomore forward back for Providence with Greg Gant, who is a top 65 recruit coming out of high school. He should be able to see his minutes uptick and progress this season. And also, I expect Ed Cooley's squad this season, once again, to be tough, gritty, full of grinders, full of battlers here that never give up. Providence's improvements defensively, that's the reason why for its massive turnaround last season there. And I predict the Friars to be a top 35 team this season and to make the 2021 NCAA tournament. I like Providence at number 4 in the Big East this season. Now we'll move on here to number 3. Welcome back to the Big East. The UConn Huskies at number 3, I predict, for this season. I predict UConn to be an NCAA tournament team and a top 30 team this season as well. Huskies head coach Dan Hurley looking to take UConn back to the good old days of the UConn's dominance during the Jim Calhoun era. Hurley in year 2 was able to coach UConn to an improving 19-12 season last season after finishing in year 1 with a 16-17 record. Hurley will also bring in a top 25 recruiting class this season. I'm liking what Dan Hurley is doing for UConn. He's going to be bringing in 2 top 60 4-star recruits with small forward Andre Jackson and center Adama Sanogo to the program. UConn lost two key players in the offseason with their leading scorer Christian Vital, who graduated from the program. Also, point guard Alterique Gilbert transferred over to Wichita State. Nevertheless, a lot of excitement this season in stores about the talent that Hurley will be bringing in during his third year as head coach of the Huskies. In the starting five will be two transfers. The first player to watch out for will be R.J. Cole, who started 65 games over the course of 2 seasons at Howard. He averaged a career 22.5 points per game and 6.2 assists per game for the Bison, while connecting on 37% of his three-point shots. Scoring against power conference opponents? Check. That should be a no problem here for R.J. Cole. He scored 27 points while going 5 for 8 from the perimeter in his second career game against Indiana. Cole also dropped 28 points against Georgetown in his sophomore season. While I don't expect Cole to have the scoring type of season that he carried Howard to during his first 2 seasons, Cole should be able to make an instant impact, and he'll have 2 seasons of eligibility left for UConn. The second transfer, Hurley, that he'll be bringing in, and I predict that will be part of the starting lineup, happens to be Rhode Island transfer Tyrese Martin, who teams up with a coach that recruited him with Dan Hurley. Martin was URI's number 3 scorer, number 2 rebounder this past season. He played in all 30 games for the Rams, and he had a career-high 24 points, along with a career-high 16 rebounds in the same game last season against Fordham. He stepped up for the injured Cyril Langevin in that game, who is Rhode Island's leading rebounder last season, as Langevin missed that game due to injury, and that's where Martin had a massive game. In the offseason, Tyrese Martin was granted a waiver to play this season for UConn. But the reason for the biggest excitement here for UConn, as far as players returning, it happens to be this player. Watch out for him. Sophomore guard James Bouknight. He is back for the Huskies. He averaged 13 points per game last season as a freshman. He finished the season off on a strong note. He posted multiple double-digit scoring games back in conference play when they were in the American last season. Senior forward, 6'11", Josh Carlton. He's going to be back for the Huskies as well and in the starting lineup, as he averaged just under 8 points per game. He was second on the team in rebounds with over 6 rebounds per game. The good news for UConn is that senior forward Tyler Polley has been cleared to play this season. Polley averaged 9.5 points per game last season before suffering a torn ACL. It's still unclear, though, however, with 6'9" sophomore big man Akok if he's going to be back for the Huskies, as he is still recovering from his torn Achilles. Even if Akok can't play this season, UConn is still got a really deep team on the roster. Heading back to stores also be junior guard Brendan Adams, also senior forward Isaiah Whaley, and also they got sophomore guard Jalen Gaffney back here as well. They got a lot of depth here for UConn, as Dan Hurley's squad, they're going to have 7 players returning from last season's roster that averaged at least 18 minutes per game. And that's not even factoring into the mix the 2 transfers, with R.J. Cole and Tyrese Martin heading over to the roster, along with an additional 2 4-star recruits as well. I really like what Dan Hurley is building here at UConn. I predict that the Huskies going to be a top 30 team this season, and they're going to finish 3rd in their first season back in the Big East. Now we're down to 2 here for the Big East for this season. I predict that number 2 in the conference will happen to be the Creighton Blue Jays. I predict that they're going to make it back to the NCAA tournament, and I predict that they're going to be a top 20 team. Creighton, by the way, they looked like a top 5 team at one point in the offseason back in April when it first started, but that all changed when leading scorer Tyshawn Alexander announced that he would enter the NBA draft and not come back to Omaha. The Blue Jays will return their 4 starters back to the program. Their top 2 perimeter shooters were guards Marcus Zegarowski and Mitch Ballack, who ranked number 2 and 3 in the Big East, and 3-point shooting this past season will be back. Zegarowski has a great opportunity to be in the running for National Player of the Year candidate for this season. Number 3 scorer Denzel Mahoney will be back as well, along with their number 4 scorer leading rebounder from this past season with Damian Jefferson. Creighton's going to have back a loaded roster of guards who can shoot the ball lights out from the floor. The Blue Jays, however, are undersized. Junior forward Christian Bishop will be back, as he's only 6'7", though, so Creighton lacks a true big and proven big man on the roster. The big question, however, is what this team will look like for their big. Creighton will add in a 4-star recruit with 6'11" Ryan Kalkbrenner. They're also going to get back due to injury 6'11" big man Jacob Epperson, who did not play last season due to injury. The wings on Creighton this season, that is what's going to carry the Blue Jays. All Creighton needs, though, is just some help inside with their bigs to progress this season, and I predict that Creighton's going to be a top 20 team in college basketball and finish second in the Big East. And now that leads me to the team that will finish number 1, and my prediction to take home the Big East crown for this season happens to be the Villanova Wildcats by far. No-brainer NCAA tournament team. I predict Villanova to be a top 5 team this season. Aside from the Big East leading three-point shooter Saddiq Bey heading to the NBA draft, everybody else is back for Villanova. The Wildcats will bring back 4 starters with Colin Gillespie, Jermaine Samuels, Justin Moore, and Jeremiah Robinson-Earl. All 40 starters returning averaged over 10 points per game last season. Head coach Jay Wright will add in a key transfer at guard, Caleb Daniels, who averaged just under 17 points per game for Tulane back in the 2018-19 season. Coming off the bench will be Cole Swider, as he has the chance to be a 6-man candidate for the Big East this season. Villanova should still be, of course, solid this season when it comes to how they play defensively. How well Villanova plays will all be determined on how efficient they are with a 3-ball. Villanova has attempted the most 3-point shots per game in the conference for the past 3 seasons. In the 2018-19 season, Villanova ranked 6th in the conference in 3-point shooting percentage. Jay Wright's squad took the step up to 3rd in the conference this past season in 3-point shooting percentage. If the threes are dropping for Villanova this season, this team's going to be legit difficult to stop. And with all the talent that Villanova will return right back to the roster, this team, in my opinion, looks like a Final Four contender. So that's a wrap here to this video. My Big East college basketball rankings here for the 2020-21 college basketball season. Make sure to like, share, comment, subscribe to my channel. Also, ring the notification bell so you can be notified about future content about my college basketball play-by-play live streams as well. Feel free to check out my college basketball preseason top 25 video also, and all the other great content on Behind the Arc Basketball. Thanks so much for watching, everybody, as this is Behind the Arc Basketball.